Welcome to Conveyancing Matters with Lorraine and Stu. Join us for a chat about all things property. Hello, Stu. Have you managed to press record this time?
I might have just sussed it out yet.
Oh, there's no flies on you, mate. But I do notice you've got your branded PCS t-shirt on there. A little bit suave, a little bit suave.
Yeah, no shirt. Well, it is here, isn't it? Yeah, no shirt today. Yeah, so
Do you
no, got
actually,
t-shirt.
do you make your staff wear them?
Of course.
Do
Branded
they
t-shirts,
love
branded jackets. Of course they love it. Yeah,
I love it.
absolutely love it. They have to pay for these t-shirts as well.
That's my next
I don't
big
know.
marketing thing. I'm going to get an Adapt Law cap.
Exactly. Especially when you're walking around Tesco's or Sainsbury's or wherever, or any supermarket of your choice, and somebody stops you and says, "Oh, you work for PCS. How's my conveyancing going?"
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, my name's Mrs. Smith. You think, "Oh, I can't think."
Oh God, I've only got 382 Mrs. Smiths. No.
Exactly.
I used to work in a nice Suffolk town actually, and my sort of equivalent was always just wandering around co-op, and my lovely elderly clients would always just come up. But there was one, bless her, she was about 90 odd at the time, and she was absolutely lovely. And I'd just hear her, because she was absolutely tiny, but you'd hear her across co-op, and she'd just go, "Darling, darling, hello, darling." Oh no, God, it's Pam. But by then it's too late, and I'd have to speak to her. She was delightful, but anyway, we weren't going to talk about any of that. We were going to talk in this Conveyancing Matters chat, Stu, a bit of a plea to the so-called Proptech firms.
Yeah.
And I thought it might be nice to give them a bit of free marketing advice, Stu. So I thought we could have a little chat about tips to property technology firms on how to market their products to conveyancers. Because what I'm thinking here, Stu, is there's probably, and we won't name them because they're not paying us, there's probably like 2 or 3 sort of big so-called prop tech organisations that have really sort of penetrated the conveyancing market, and their digital technology-based services, I think, are making a big difference to how conveyancers work.
Yeah.
But it's kind of struck me, particularly someone maybe a bit more outside the profession now than before, I seem to see, launched every week some supposed prop tech solution from, wonderful entrepreneurs who are often trying to give, property firms, conveyancers, or indeed estate agents solutions to problems that I didn't know I'd got. And I thought that it might be handy for you and I just to have a bit of a chat about that. And as I say, perhaps sort of help them along their way in how to market effectively to us. So, what sort of things do you come across, Stu? I mean, how many times a week, a month, or a year does somebody try and punt a new product to you? You're at the top of a big organisation now, Stu. You must get it all the time.
It'll be a weekly basis. There'll be a call and email, punting a particular product on us. I think the key, which a lot of the companies don't quite, get, is that, we are approached time and time again by companies that feel that the conveyancing service is archaic, it's slow, and that they have the answer. But, most of the time, I have to say that they are potentially coming up with a solution to a problem that actually doesn't exist. And I think a lot of, prop tech companies, but maybe everybody needs to understand that, we're acting for clients that are buying a house. It's still an old-fashioned sort of entity. It's bricks and mortar. It's not something that, people buy, on a whim just by going on the internet. It's still very personal, isn't it? So we provide a personal service to clients. So these companies do need to look at, what we do and actually understand the industry, because lots are punting products on us that really aren't relevant.
I think also, Stu, and again, I think it's understanding your market, isn't it? Because what I find is that, as I say, supposed prop tech firms, and some of them are, brilliant, don't get me wrong, and I'm not criticising anybody for being innovative with anything digital, quite the contrary, but they, I think, from what I can see, they try and talk to conveyancers, conveyancing lawyers, property firms in their own language. They are not talking to me. They don't seem to have made that leap. They might have a product that is the best thing since shark repellent, But if they are not talking to me in my language or in a language that I will understand, so that I understand their offering really quickly, then, as I say, it could be the best product in the world, but I'm still not going to buy it because I'm not going to engage with it. For example, you and I, we do not probably talk very much about, easements, profits à prendre and disbursements, because they're inherently sort of legal terms. They're terms from our environment, but they're not terms that other people are going to understand and grasp quickly. So if I want to talk to somebody and say, hey, I can help you, with your easement, I'm not going to put that on LinkedIn. I'm going to say I can help you sort out the problems you've got with your right of way. And I do think it's a language barrier quite often. You sometimes have, some really very, really very clever techie people who've come up with really clever techie stuff. But still, if I don't know what the hell it is you're doing and what the hell it is you're selling and what problem you're trying to solve, I'm not even going to stop. I'm just going to scroll past you in my scrolly past you way. So have you come across that, Stu? And what sort of things do you think that firms can do to kind of help themselves really when they're trying to sell to us?
Well, it's identifying what problems we have, because as you've already alluded to, there are products that are on the market that really have made a difference. Not just to the client process, but also to how we run a law firm. So there's some great products out there, and those products are, they've been invented or designed by people that have realised the problems that we have, and they've found a solution to that problem. But the key with Proptech for me is, you've got to identify what the problem is before you have the solution, and that's the key. So knowing the industry, knowing, particularly property lawyers, and the problems that we face, that's definitely the key.
I also think, and again, to be completely fair, I don't necessarily look in an enormous amount of detail at people's offering, but it's often a bit of white noise, Stu, that people seem to be offering me solutions that are, quite similar, products that are quite similar to what's already out there. And I hate to use the marketing phrase USP, but what is your unique selling point? Why are you offering something different? What is it that's different about your product that means I should use you and not the product I'm already using, for example? Because that's a big issue. Conveyancers aren't a great one for change, are they, Stu? Really?
No, certainly not. And the even bigger, or equal bigger issue is the price. Because a lot of products that are punted on us are being sold at extreme prices that there's no way we could afford, even if we thought it was a solution. I think understanding the sort of profit margins in a conveyancing transaction and then having a product that fits into that criteria is mega important. And I hear far too often sort of terminology that, these costs can be passed on to the client and things like that. Well, anybody that says that, hasn't dealt with clients for a long time, because the last thing we want to do is pass on more cost to a client, because they're very sensitive to costs in general. With the fees, transparency rules and everything else, we're so there to be shot at with regards to what we charge. Everything's up front, but certainly passing anything else on is a big no-no for me.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point actually, Stu, because much as I hate to say it, and I hope that there'll be members of the home buying and selling public watching this too, but lots of them quite understandably are very, very cost conscious. And even if you're complying with the transparency rules, as you say, and you're putting the breakdown of the outgoings on your website, well, if you've just got some sort of magic fee of another £50 plus VAT, or even £20 plus VAT, that can sometimes, for some benefit that perhaps you perceive as a benefit, but your client won't understand that, or certainly the punter who's looking at your website for the first time, that could be the reason actually that they go somewhere else. Because they just think, oh, well, no, PCS are going to be charging us another 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds. We're not really sure what that's for. So we'll walk on by.
Most definitely. No, most definitely. I think in terms of sort of products that we always think, why does this not exist? We use a number of different pieces of software, from case management systems to quoting tools, accounting software. And one of the big problems as a property lawyer now is that you have so many different platforms that you have to log into, so many different platforms for so many different areas of work that you go through. It's almost becoming sort of counterproductive, because you've got to have a password book as long as your arm just to remember how to get into some of these platforms. So we spend significant amounts of money, and it's significant amounts of money on the case management systems that we operate, and I'm sure all law firms do that. So when any new product comes along, one of the key criteria is or will be, will it be able to integrate with what we've already got? Because if it doesn't, then automatically it's, you're a 90% no before you even start.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a good point. I mean, and I go into a lot of firms now, Stu, obviously with my locum hat on. And I think I can honestly say in my professional career, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, and forgive me to all the case management system firms out there, and I'm sure there's lots of you, and I'm sure you're fantastic, but I've never heard a firm say, oh yes, and our case management system's the best instant shark repellent, and we absolutely love it, and it does all the things we want it to do. I worked in one firm once, and the system I think was brilliant. If you were marketing, it pulled out the marketing data fantastically. So as a marketing tool, it was absolutely brilliant. But as the lawyers who were supposed to be the people that were able to use it, it was absolutely terrible. The version control was awful. It was awful to access. They had two guys just going around the firm training people all the time because it was so hard to use. And they'd actually sort of formed a sort of user group, were refusing to pay half the fees for the system. Now, I'm of course, they're all not in that bracket. But I think the thing is, firms sort of commit to these case management systems and this level of expense. And what I find bizarre about the sort of human behaviour with that is that firms actually end up adapting the way they work to fit the system, which isn't necessarily the best way, because that's what the system does. So as I say, again, advice to a new Proptech firm with a new product out there, as you quite rightly say, Stu, if you can't make my life easier, then and you're not going to be able to integrate with my system, then as you say, we're probably not going to be using you.
I think also as well, it has to be bespoke for the property market or conveyancing. There's too many products that are out there that are pulled in from other industries or other areas of law. For me, it's great if we could have products that are solely specific to conveyancing, to the property market, and that's the way we would get the most out of them. If I take our case management system at the moment, it's the best one that I looked at. It has its faults. Again, in terms of marketing, it doesn't have any really facilities that are of any ilk. But there's loads on there about other different sort of areas of law and whatnot. And I completely understand that from a software provider, you don't want to limit your market. But I can't see why. I'm sure it's not as easy as this, but can't there be bolt-ons? So if you do matrimonial, you can bolt that part onto the product. But as far as we're concerned, we don't use probably, I'm guessing more than 50% of our case management system we don't use because it's not applicable to what we do. And, there's so many things that are on these products like time recording, where I think most conveyancing now is fixed fee. So there's so many parts of these products that aren't applicable to what we do. And that's the real bugbear, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting point. I mean, I think, in terms of, tips to Proptech firms who are trying to sell to conveyancers, I mean, what I'm really interested in and what I think the majority of decision makers in conveyancing firms, if you can even get them to look up from their incredibly busy caseloads to even think about new stuff. But I think and the questions we would need answering quickly are, how is it going to make my business quicker? How is it going to make my business more cost effective? But the absolutely key one, which you and I come on to nearly every time we chat, Stu, how are you going to help me manage the risk of conveyancing? So it's got to be speed, it's got to be cost, it's got to be risk. And I think you've got to have, if you're a Proptech firm out there trying to sell a product, you've got to be able to answer at least two, if not all of those three questions, I would say. And also, Stu, I mean, what I find quite difficult and what people don't seem to understand about the market that you and I operate in is, of course, that rather tiny issue of client confidentiality. Now, a lot of these products seem to be built around the idea of data sharing. Well, if everybody has a vision of the entire sort of chain across an entire process, then it's all got to be better, hasn't it? Well, I would argue not necessarily, but that's probably a different discussion. But again, if you're coming into a firm and you're trying to sell me a product, well, you've got to be able to explain the confidentiality issue. How is my client's confidentiality protected? And even if you don't understand property lawyer, solicitor, licensed conveyancer confidentiality, well, you should jolly well be understanding GDPR these days, surely.
Yeah, well, most definitely. Client confidentiality is something you don't hear as much these days. But we get it quite regularly where a client will say to us, oh, Christ, don't tell so-and-so this, or, my money's got held up, don't tell the agent this, don't tell the other side this, or they've got a problem with the mortgage because they need another pay slip, don't tell them this. Obviously, we wouldn't. But that's where some of the sharing platform types of Proptech could be difficult to get around. I think platforms for data sharing potentially do have their place. I definitely think that there are some out there that I've looked at and that I've sort of been demoed would make significant difference to what we do and would significantly help. I've seen others that certainly wouldn't. But, data protection, GDPR, obviously these are buzzwords that are an absolute given for law firms, an absolute given that, any data has to be protected.
Yeah, as I say, and I think I think that the zeal for information sharing, I think is, and again, we say this quite a lot, it's all very well until something goes wrong, Stu. A client may well say, yeah, of course, I'm really happy for, Uncle Tom Cobley and everyone to know sort of where I am and what I'm doing and what my inside leg measurement is. But I hate to say it, but if there is an information glitch or a breach of confidentiality, well, I'm afraid it comes back time and time again, Stu. It's you and me that's going to get it in the neck. That's the problem, because we're the only people in this whole shooting match that have got the professional responsibility.
Yeah,
so,
and ultimately we've breached that retainer with our client because we have released that information into a more public domain than just themselves. So yeah, it would be on our head be it kind of thing. It's interesting, isn't it? There's a big demand for data sharing. It's probably one of the buzzwords in Proptech at the minute. And like I said, there are some products out there that are making mass inroads into this market and into this area. But, we do need to treat it with caution, most definitely.
Yeah, I think so. And probably to conclude this Conveyancing Matters, Stu, and again, this is perhaps, a bit more free marketing advice for Proptech firms. If you want anything more detailed, well, find me on my website. But please, in your marketing, can I make a plea? I'll make a direct plea. Normally I'm looking at Stu, lovely Stu, particularly in his t-shirt, but let me make a direct plea to you. If you're a Proptech firm and you're trying to sell to property lawyers, can I suggest you do not use the words synergy, catalyze, and ecosystems? Can I perhaps suggest you simply just banish that sort of terminology from your marketing and simply, in 3 bullet points in a LinkedIn post, tell me what you do? Well, hopefully, Stu, that's given our lovely Proptech colleagues something to think about. So thanks very much for your thoughts on that.
No problems.
And we'll say bye-bye, and hopefully people will